Welcome to today's reading from the Krishna book. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We are on the chapter Ill-Motivated Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra hinted to Akrura that he had complete faith in Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. At the same time, he was very partial to his family members. In the very near future, Krishna would vanquish all the members of his family, and in a helpless condition, Dhritarashtra would take shelter of Krishna's lotus feet. To show his special favor to a devotee, Krishna usually takes away all the objects of his material affection, thus forcing the devotee to be materially helpless, with no alternative but to accept the lotus feet of Krishna. This actually happened to Dhritarashtra after the end of the battle of Kurukshetra. Dhritarashtra could realize two opposing factors acting before him. He could understand that Krishna was there to remove all the unnecessary burdens of the world. His sons were an unnecessary burden, and so he expected that they would be killed. At the same time, he could not rid himself of his unlawful affection for his sons. Understanding these two contradictory factors, he offered his respectful obeisances to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The contradictory ways of material existence are very difficult to understand. They can be taken only as the inconceivable execution of the plan of the Supreme, who by his inconceivable energy creates this material world and enters into it, and sets into motion the three modes of nature. When everything is created, he enters into each and every living entity and into the smallest atom. No one can understand the incalculable plans of the Supreme Lord. After hearing this statement, Akrura could clearly understand that Dhritarashtra was not going to change his policy of discriminating against the Pandavas in favor of his sons. He at once took leave of his friends in Hastinapur and returned to his home in the kingdom of the Yadus. After returning home, he vividly informed Lord Krishna and Balram of the actual situation in Hastinapur and the intentions of Dhritarashtra. Akrura was sent to Hastinapur by Krishna to study this, and by the grace of the Lord he was successful. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 49th chapter of Krishna, Ill-Motivated Dhritarashtra. Chapter 50, Krishna erects the Dwarka fort. Upon Kamsa's death, his two wives became widows. According to Vedic civilization, a woman is never independent. She has three stages of life. Childhood, a woman should live under the protection of her father. A youthful woman should live under the protection of her young husband. And in the event of the death of her husband, she should live under the protection of her grown-up sons. Or if she has no grown-up sons, she must go back to her father and live as a widow under his protection. It appears that Kamsa had no grown-up sons. Therefore, after his wives became widows, they returned to the shelter of their father. Kamsa had two queens, Asti and Prapti, and both happened to be the daughters of the king Jarasandh, the lord of Bihar province, known in those days as Magad. After reaching home, the two queens explained their awkward position following Kamsa's death. The king of Magad, Jarasandh, was mortified on hearing the pitiable condition of his daughters. When informed of the death of Kamsa, Jarasandh decided on the spot that he would rid the world of all the members of the Yadu dynasty. He decided that since Krishna had killed Kamsa, the whole dynasty of Yadus should be killed. He began to make extensive arrangements to attack the kingdom of Mathura. With his innumerable military phalanxes consisting of many thousands of chariots, horses, elephants, and infantry soldiers, Jarasandh prepared 13 such military phalanxes to retaliate the death of Kamsa. Taking with him all his military strength, he attacked the capital of the Yadu kings, Mathura, surrounding it from all directions. Sri Krishna, who appeared like an ordinary human being, saw the immense strength of Jarasandh, which appeared like an ocean about to cover a beach at any moment. He also perceived that the inhabitants of Mathura were overwhelmed with fear. He began to think within himself about his mission as an incarnation and how to tackle the present situation before him. He thought that since he was not going to conquer the kingdom of Magad, to kill the king of Magad, namely Jarasandh, was useless. His mission was to diminish the overburdening population with the whole world. Therefore, he took the opportunity to face so many men, chariots, elephants, and horses. The military strength of Jarasandh had appeared before him, and he decided to kill the entire force of Jarasandh so that he would go back and reorganize his military strength. While Lord was thinking in that way, two beautiful chariots, fully equipped with drivers, weapons, flags, and other paraphernalia, arrived before him from outer space. Krishna saw the two chariots present before him and immediately addressed his elder brother Balram, who is also known as Sankarshan. My dear elder brother, best among the Aryans, you are the Lord of the universe, and specifically you are the protector of the Yadu dynasty. The members of the Yadu dynasty sense great danger before the soldiers of Jarasandh, and they are very much aggrieved. Just to give him protection, your chariot is also here, filled with weapons. I request you to sit on your chariot and kill all these soldiers, the entire military strength of the enemy. The two of us have descended on this earth just to annihilate such unnecessary bellicose forces and give protection to the pious devotees. So we have the opportunity to fulfill our mission. Please let us execute it. Thus Krishna and Balram, the descendants of Dashara, decided to annihilate the 13 military companies of Jarasandh. After equipping themselves with military dress, Krishna and Balram mounted their chariots. Krishna rode the chariot on which Daruka was the driver. With a small army, they came out of the city of Mathura, blowing their respective conch shells. Curiously enough, although the other party was equipped with greater military strength, when they heard the vibration of Krishna's conch shell, their hearts were shaken. When Jarasandh saw Balram and Krishna, he was a little bit compassionate because they happened to be related to him as grandsons. He specifically addressed Krishna as Purushadham, meaning the lowest among men. Actually, Krishna is known in all Vedic literatures as Purushottam, the highest amongst men. Jarasandh had no intention of addressing Krishna as Purushottam, but great scholars have determined the true meaning of the word Purushadham to be one who makes all other personalities go downwards. Actually, no one can be equal to or greater than the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Jarasandh said, "It will be a great dishonor for me to fight with boys like Krishna and Balram because Krishna had killed Kamsa." Jarasandh specifically addressed him as the killer of his own relatives. Kamsa had killed many of his own nephews, yet Jarasandh did not take notice of it. But because Krishna had killed his maternal uncle Kamsa, Jarasandh tried to criticize him. That is the way of the demoniac dealings. Demons do not try to find their own faults or those of their friends, but try to find the faults of their enemies. Jarasandh also criticized Krishna for not even being a Kshatriya, because he was raised by Maharaj Nand. Krishna was not a Kshatriya but a Vaishya. Vaishya hidden. So Krishna was both hidden and raised by Nand Maharaj. Jarasandh accused Krishna of three faults: that he killed his own maternal uncle, that he was not even a Kshatriya, and that he was hidden in his childhood. And therefore Jarasandh felt shame to fight with him. Next he turned down Balram and addressed him. "You, Balram, if you like, you can fight along with him, and if you have patience, then you can wait to be killed by my arrows. Thus you can be promoted to heaven." It is stated in the Bhagavad Gita that a Kshatriya can benefit in either of two ways while fighting. If a Kshatriya gains victory in the fight, he enjoys the results of the victory, but even if he killed, he is promoted to the heavenly kingdom. After hearing Jarasandh speak in that way, Krishna answered, "My dear King Jarasandh, heroes do not talk much, rather they show their prowess. Because you are talking a great deal, it appears that you are assured of your death in this battle. We do not care to hear you any longer, for it is useless to hear the words of a person who is going to die or one who is very distressed. To fight with Krishna, Jarasandha surrounded him from all the sides with great military strength. As the sun appears covered by cloudy air and dust, Krishna, the Supreme Sun, was covered by the military strength of Jarasandha. Krishna's and Balram's chariots were marked with pictures of Garuda and palm trees, respectively. The women of Mathura all stood on the tops of the houses, palaces, and gates to see the wonderful fight. But when Krishna's chariot was surrounded by Jarasandha's military force and was no longer visible to them, they were so frightened that some of them fainted. Krishna saw himself overwhelmed by the military strength of Jarasandha. His small army of soldiers was being harassed, so he immediately took up his bow named Sharang. He took his arrows from their quiver, and one after another he set them on the bowstring and shot them toward the enemy. They were so accurate that the elephants, horses, and infantry soldiers of Jarasandha were quickly killed. The incessant arrows shot by Krishna appeared like a whirlwind of the blazing fire, killing all the military strength of Jarasandha. As Krishna released his arrows, all the elephants gradually began to fall, their heads severed by the arrows. Similarly, all the horses fell and their necks severed, and the chariots fell also along with their flags and the fighters and drivers on the chariots. Almost all the infantry soldiers fell on the field of battle, their heads, hands, and legs cut off. In this way, thousands of elephants, horses, and men were killed, and their blood flowed just like the waves of a river. In that river, the severed arms of the men appeared like snakes, and the heads like tortoises. The dead bodies of the elephants appeared like small islands, and the dead horses appeared like sharks. By the arrangement of the supreme will, there was a great river of blood filled with paraphernalia. The hands and legs of the infantry soldiers floated just like different kinds of fish. The hair of the soldiers floated like seaweed and moss. And the floating bows of the soldiers resembled waves of the river. And all the jewelry from the bodies of the soldiers and commanders seemed like many pebbles flowing down the river of blood. Lord Balram, who is also known as Sankarshan, began to fight with his club in such a heroic way that the river of blood created by Krishna overflooded. Cowards became very much afraid upon seeing this ghastly and horrible scene, and the heroes began to talk delightedly among themselves about the heroism of the two brothers. Although Jarasandha was equipped with the vast ocean of military strength, the fighting of Lord Krishna and Balram converted the whole situation into a ghastly scene far beyond ordinary fighting. Persons of ordinary merit cannot estimate how it could be possible but when such activities are accepted as pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, under whose will everything is possible, then this can be understood. The Supreme Personality of Godhead creates, maintains, and dissolves the cosmic manifestation merely by his will. For him to create such a vast scene of devastation while fighting with an enemy is not so wonderful. And yet, because Krishna and Balram were fighting with Jarasandha just like ordinary human beings, the affairs appeared wonderful. When all the soldiers of Jarasandha had been killed and he was the only one left alive, certainly he was very much depressed. Sri Balram immediately arrested him, just as with great strength a lion captures another. But while Lord Balram was binding Jarasandha with the rope of Varuna and ordinary ropes also, Lord Krishna, with a greater plan in the mind for the future, asked Lord Balram not to arrest him. Then he released Jarasandha. As a great fighting hero, Jarasandha was ashamed, and he decided that he would no longer live as a king, but would resign from his position in the royal order and go to the forest to practice meditation under severe austerities and penances. As he was returning home with other royal friends, however, they advised him not to retire but to regain strength to fight again with Krishna in the near future. The princely friends of Jarasandha instructed him that ordinarily it would not have been possible for him to be defeated by the strength of the Yadu kings. The defeat he had experienced was simply due to his ill luck. The princely order encouraged King Jarasandh his fighting. They said was certainly heroic. Therefore, he should not take his defeat very seriously, since it was due only to his past misdeeds. After all, there was no fault in his fighting. In this way, Jarasandh, the king of Magad province, having lost all his strength and having been insulted by his arrest and subsequent release, could do nothing but return to his kingdom. Thus Lord Krishna conquered the soldiers of Jarasandh, although Krishna's army was tiny in comparison to Jarasandh's. Not a pinch of his strength was lost, whereas all of Jarasandh's men were killed. So we will continue from here onwards tomorrow. So Krishna has captured all the soldiers and all the total army of Jarasandh, and Jarasandh was made captive and then released. Because Krishna has a bigger plan, Krishna could easily killed him, arrested him or killed him, but he didn't do that. So there is a plan behind this which will be relieved in the subsequent readings. So I will carry on with the reading tomorrow. Thank you, Narayan Keshav Prabhu, watching, and Shamita, you just joined us. Thank you for coming. I'll see you all tomorrow. Hare Krishna.